Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to today's webinar. My name's Ivan. I'll be your host for today. I can see, as always with these Zoom calls, a lot of people are just joining now. We're getting people attending the webinar at a furious rate. So we're just going to wait a minute before we get going on the session. Let me run through some housekeeping rules though while people are joining in. I'm sure we're all used to webinars now, know how they work, but the webinar today, you're all on mute, no cameras either, so we can't see you. Luca and me aren't on mute, so if our dogs or kids start making noise, then we're the ones who are in trouble, not you guys. If you have any audio problems or any other challenges with the webinar, then do use the chat function in GoToWebinar. We have a couple of people on standby just to help you out in case you can't hear anything or anything else that goes wrong for you. The session today is going to last around 30 minutes, but who knows? Me and Luca like to chat, so it might go a little bit longer. There's plenty of opportunity at the end for question and answers. We have had some questions submitted in advance for a few people, so we've already got some to run through. But if any point in time you want to prep a question for us, we always love the questions at the end. That keeps us on our toes. We'll always look forward to what people are asking. So there's a question panel in the GoToWebinar session. Just throw your questions in there, and then we'll address those at the end. But for now, I think we'll get started. We've got a good cohort of people, so welcome. I can see some names I recognise, some I don't, so it's nice to see a good variety of people on the call. But we'll get started now. The topic of today's webinar is all around consumer-grade technology and how that dovetails into some of the strategies and priorities for HR leaders. We're driving a lot of the conversation off a report that we commissioned through Forrester that was published around the summertime. We'll talk a little bit about that later on and give you lots of interesting insight about what came out of that report. But let's firstly do a couple of intros. My name's Ivan. I'm the co-founder of Applaud. So welcome to the webinar. I'll be your host for the rest of the session. But I'm delighted to be joined by Luca from LACE. Hi, Luca. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Ivan, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Luca Winterborn, and I work for LACE Partners. I'm a senior manager at LACE with a specific focus on employee experience. So as we go through the discussion today between Ivan and I, I'll be adding in market insights and client learnings from the employee experience lens. And
Luca's a little bit croaky today, aren't you, Luca? You've had a little bit of
unfortunately, yeah, back end of a chest infection. So if I mute suddenly for a glass of water, which is on standby, or a cough, please excuse me.
Well, I tell you what, you've got a very handsome photo there. I think I need to up my game looking at your nice, you've got the husky voice to go with it. Anyway, before we get on to the session, some of you will know Applaud, some of you will know LACE, so we thought we'd do a quick introduction of our respective companies. And I think, Luca, you're up first, so if you were to do a quick elevator pitch about
absolutely,
that'd be great.
Absolutely, a pleasure. So, as I said earlier, when I work for LACE Partners, we are a boutique people consulting organisation. We're quite small, but we play in a very big space. So we will tackle any challenges that our clients have around the people agenda. And on this page here, you can see in all these different boxes the kind of activities that we support our clients with on a day-to-day basis. And more broadly speaking, it's categorized under three key headers. So firstly, transforming HR. We use market insights and data to help counsel and guide our clients into how best to evolve their HR function. We focus heavily on the digital experience, and that's tech implementations and advisory as well. And we also focus heavily on delivering sustainable change. And that's really about embedding employees in the entire change process to ensure the best wins at the end. Now, all of these three categories are underpinned by employee experience. So that's hence why I'm here today, to focus on the employee experience side of things. But that's the critical, the key for me. Employee experience drives the majority of our activity. I will just add one final thing, actually, just before we move on to that slide, is that we've just recently been accredited a great place to work in the UK. So I think it's important to reference because we do practice what we preach, and I think that's really key. The next slide is just to give you guys a flavour of the types of clients that we work with. what you'll see from this, and again, the biggest takeaway is that we're multi-industry. We work with a broad range of clients, from professional services right through to products and manufacturing. So yeah, over to you, Ivan. I think you're on mute. The famous words of 2020, you're still on mute.
Yeah, good set of logos there, Luca. Thanks for sharing what you guys do, and I'll explain why we're great partners together. But just for the purposes of the audience, we've got people from different regions, not just the UK. Do you do work outside the UK too, for those of our friends on the call that aren't UK based?
We do absolutely. We're multinational. We have clients across the globe, from the Far East to North America and beyond. So yeah, an absolutely huge range of clients. Typically with headcounts of over 1,000, anything up to 30 to 50 plus. So yeah, very highly experienced in what we do. Like I said earlier on, we're quite a small boutique organisation, but we play in a big space. And I think one of the key things about LACE for me, having recently joined the organisation, actually the business, is that we personalise more than I've seen from other consultancies. It's starting to sound like a sales pitch, but it's not. It's one of the things that attracted me to working for LACE, actually, is the focus that we place on personalising solutions and working with organisations and their employee bases to come up with the right solutions.
Very nice. Let me tell everyone a little bit about Applaud. So we work closely with LACE as a partner, but Applaud are a software provider. So in the HR tech space, we have a platform that we deliver to enterprise customers that really simplifies their HR technology landscape, delivering a consumer grade experience on top of all those HR systems that customers have. So we'll talk about a little bit more Applaud as we go through, but one of the interesting things I find when we're going to customers is how customers get started. You know, it's always great to buy technology that looks really fancy and is all nice and shiny, but how do you use it? And actually where a company like LACE really helps is working with customers and going through where are your pain points, what are your business processes, challenges, how do we model that and use the technology in the best way? And I think that's one of the lessons we've had over the last year. When we're talking to customers, you know, have you got that design up front? So LACE is a great partner for us to work with. That's exactly the sweet spot they work in, as Luca mentioned. I managed to skip over the agenda, but let's go back because that's a nice order. So let's get on to the content of today's session. Earlier in the year, as I said, we commissioned a report through Forrester, and that was really driving around what are the priorities post-pandemic, or we're still in it, aren't we? But the things that the HR leaders are looking at in terms of their challenges in 2021, but particular focus on what are their plans around HR technology, because so much has changed over the last couple of years, including technology priorities. And really, what lessons are we seeing that's been driven by the technology experiences we experience as consumers? You know, how is that feeding into our decisions and priorities in the HR technology space? So it's quite a good long, well, it's a good report. It's a long report. It's got about 20 pages or so. You can download it off our respective websites, but we've pulled out a few key points to chat through, which both Luca and I found quite interesting. Starting off with some of the pain points that we saw from the survey from HR professionals, what people's top priorities are for the coming year, and then sort of dovetailing into tech. You know, what are leaders investing in, looking to spend their budget on, and then looking at things like ROI, often seen as more of a soft experience, can be seen as a soft sell, especially from sort of CFOs and everyone else looking for savings and stuff. But actually, more and more insight is coming out around actual cost savings you can make through investing in digital employee experience. So those are the key points we're going to do. The survey was done earlier in the year. Forrester went out independently of us to around 175 leaders, HR leaders, so titles of VPs, directors, CHROs, and so on. So a really good cohort of very experienced HR professionals around the globe. The global survey. It was really interesting to see some of the information come out. So we're going to start off with where we should always start off with, actually, where are your challenges? before we start looking at technology solutions, which is always exciting, you should always look at what the business case is. And this was an interesting part of the survey to say what are the key pain points that HR professionals are seeing today. Context really around HR technology in particular, as opposed to just general HR pain points, but a very, very strong statistic at the top about supporting remote employees, because of course now we're all remote, aren't we? That's the big change that's happened over the last 2 years. Interesting looking at some of the stats underpinning that top one, and we often see a lot of the pain points that we hear from customers when we're talking to them about the challenges they're facing with their technology portfolio. Things like it's too complex for our employees to use, processes, systems are disjointed or in silos, lack of visibility about data, things like, I don't know, my manager submits me a promotion approval and I can't find out what the status is, so I ring up the help desk, and then you get a high number of help desk requests. All of these things compound up to really give a big pain point for the ability to support remote employees, people that aren't in the office anymore, as well as people that are not office-based anyway. So it's much more pronounced. All these challenges around HR tech that we might have had brewing has really come to the boiling point over the last 2 years, where people aren't in that office and don't have that local support. Luca, I don't know if this sort of aligns with what you sort of see with the customers when you go talking to people and sort of sit down and say, where you're struggling at the moment, what sort of anecdotes or stories you've got for the workplace on this sort of topic.
Absolutely spot on, Ivan. And so I would just like to start off by saying, if anyone hasn't downloaded the Forrester report, please do have a look at it. There's a lot of detail in there, and it's really valuable information and resource. There's a lot of detail on this page too, but I won't go into that. I think what I want to just say is that whether we like it or not, hybrid working is not going away in most industries. It's here to stay. And some of the conversations that we're having with clients are perhaps a lack of acknowledgement of that. And I think the sooner that HR can realise that we've been forced into this situation by a pandemic, it's been a cultural change outside of the workplace environment, and that dial cannot be reversed. The sooner that HR get onto that bandwagon and start to embrace the hybrid work model and supporting colleagues, especially remote employees, further, they'll start to see the wins. And you use the example of Amazon. Only a couple of weeks ago, we're seeing business after business after business, big organizations embracing hybrid working. So Amazon have now said that we're going to embrace the hybrid working model for all non-warehouse based employees. These are big statements to make, and tech of course plays a significant part in enabling that. I think it's also useful to sort of focus on employee value propositions as well. The ability to work remotely in a hybrid fashion is very attractive right now to the workforce, and we're seeing the shift and the motivators change. It's always traditionally been pay and reward, but now we are starting to see in the marketplace a shift. So hybrid working and that flexibility is definitely the number 5 priorities, along with diversity and inclusion, well-being. The whole shift has changed. The schematics have changed about regarding what people look for when they come to an employer. And of course, I think I won't talk too much now about the Great Resignation. We've all heard about it. Great resignation, great reskilling, great opportunity, whatever you want to call it. It's happening. The statistics are there. And organizations that are continuing to ignore hybrid working and continue to ignore the wants, needs and support mechanisms that their remote employees need will continue to see, I believe, an exodus of really good talent into other organizations.
Yes, it's what we've really seen the last year or so is because everyone is remote now, or can be, as you say. This used to be a sort of a challenge you used to see in certain industries. We used to talk a lot to retail organizations or gas or utilities where the majority of the workforce weren't in office, and there used to be a big focus on can we get stuff on mobile applications and all that sort of thing. And now, of course, it's shifted because we've got managers and regular employees or normal office-based workers are now kind of classed as remote. How do you solve challenges like onboarding someone that never comes into the office, or getting them the right equipment into the home, or making sure they've got the right desk environment because like well-being is top of mind for a lot of people. So there's a lot
Of
of kind of that sort of personal stuff, but how do you get your technology to support that? And we're seeing customers that really haven't maybe invested over the last 10 years of really finding that quite a pronounced problem, I think. I don't know if you see the same sort of thing.
Absolutely the same thing. Yeah. It's I think what the pandemic has taught us, has certainly showed us in terms of some of our clients and some of them, and what we're seeing in the marketplace, is organisations who had these processes and the tech now before the pandemic have continued to be able to offer a really, really good level of service. Those organisations who didn't have much to hide behind, because the processes maybe weren't as robust as they should have been. The tech wasn't in place. So what that left was for a space for a really poor employee experience throughout the pandemic. It's just strengthening the case, I think, to invest in good tech now, and organisations that don't, I truly believe, will continue to see poor engagement scores, lower engagement, and good talent will continue to leave.
It segued beautifully onto the next slide. It's almost like you knew what's coming, Luke, whatever you did. But the next part of the story was, okay, we've got these pain points, where are people investing? And again, focusing now on tech in terms of the budget. And this one was really eye-opening for me, where you look at the top 3 priorities for HR leaders. Again, a few stats on the screen, I'm sure people are reading as I'm talking, but if you look at the critical or high priority, which is top of mind, right? Critical is certainly top of mind. Yeah, 50% of HR leaders are looking at workplace technology. Go back to March 2020 as a CEO of a software, and I'm thinking, goodness, what's going to happen to technology budgets? Well, they've actually gone up, not the other way around. But underneath that, looking at even more budget for digital transformation, which has been a buzzword for the last 5 years, but people are taking it a lot more seriously now, I think. But that middle one, that the employee experience strategy design, has absolutely leapt up from 2 years ago. It really has jumped up from being 5th, 6th, 7th down. I remember looking at these surveys all the time to be, again, top of mind, which is great for you guys, I'm sure. But again, are you seeing the same sort of priorities coming through when you go and talk to customers?
Yeah, we are. We absolutely are. And this slide, nice. I think the statistics here nicely represent the shift in employee experience and who, not necessarily ownership of employee experience, but within organisations, who has key accountability. And it's always traditionally been HR. HR has always been perceived as the owner of employee experience. But what we saw with the pandemic was the shift, and the budgets actually went into CIOs. Equally perhaps because the tech that we had, whether we were using Teams or whatever, enabled the employee experience, and it couldn't happen without the tech. So yes, we are seeing similar levels of investment being placed in tech solutions across the marketplace in all industries, actually.
Just talk to that last point on digital transformation for me, because this is, again, interesting, because digital transformation has been can I say it's been a bit of a cliche the last 6 years or so. It's like, everyone's doing digital transformation, what does it mean? You went to the people on our webinar and said, what do you understand that means? You probably get quite a lot of different questions, but I'm definitely seeing, and I'm seeing personally when we sort of talk to customers now, there's this drive to get rid of all those spreadsheets, get rid of all those processes, their emails. Can we use platforms to automate this stuff? I'm sort of interested if you see the same thing, and why has it caused a pandemic for us to realise that we don't want to be shifting Excel spreadsheets over email all over the place and having these processes. We have to ring up someone to get something done. Is this, people have been wanting to do this for a long time, but it seems that people are doing now and putting budget behind it.
Yeah, I mean, automation is certainly on an upward trend. There's absolutely no doubt about it, and organisations and across all sectors again are really looking towards tech to try and automate key people processes, and that could be involving things like chatbot solutions, smart information systems where you can just access the information you need at the click of a finger, at the click of a button. That's been happening for a while, but again, the pandemic has expedited that, and I think it's traveling in the right direction. It's around refocusing efforts. Nobody wants their workforce spending inordinate amounts of time focusing on process. You want your people to do what they're paid to do when they're there. We're seeing similar trends, as I said, with clients, and it's certainly going that way. Automation is very much an important priority. With regards to what is a digital transformation, I think that's a really good question. It's a cliche, isn't it? well, are they going to do a digital transformation? Let's get some resource on it. I've seen it happen quite a number of times. What I always say to our clients is HR has traditionally, and I still see it happen quite a lot, solutionize and isolation. Now, one of the key success factors for a good employee experience is to actually speak to your workforce, and it's the simplest thing. Speak to your workforce to understand, well, what are the needs, wants and desires of your people, and then work on a solution that meets that, rather than solutionizing in isolation on what you think your people might need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that's a topic we'll sort of come on to in some of the last slides, but I definitely align with that. I've jumped onto the next slide around investment. We'll come back into that second, but the number of clients we talk to who I don't feel have gone to their workforce and actually got that good insight into what it's like to be on the other end of all this stuff that they've been made to use. A lot of the time you still find requirements and priorities are driven by what HR want for themselves, and that sort of shift is changing, and some customers are better than others, but it's a good steer. It's a good steer when you go out to clients. I've sort of said this next slide about where investment is going, and again, this is another dramatic shift I've seen in the last 2 years. So at the top, we just called out two of the key ones. The top area for investment is HR service delivery. And I think HR service delivery maybe 3 years ago we'd associate with being like a help desk, like a ServiceNow or a Right Now or something like that. HR service delivery now is more than that. That's kind of like table stakes, right? It's all that automation, it's all that digital assistant, chatbots, knowledge base, enterprise search, and everything else to make the delivery of the HR service better, as opposed to swapping out your PeopleSoft system for Workday, or moving from SAP on-premise to SuccessFactors, which 3 years ago was still a massive thing. A massive thing going to clients. There's still lots of clients going for that transformation, but look at this stat: 6%, only 6% are now looking to replace that that old stuff, or maybe it's new stuff, depending where you are. But again, the trend I'm seeing much less with clients saying, do you know what? It's not a priority for us to change our system of record from on-premise to cloud, or whatever it is, maybe cloud to cloud. We need to do more with what we've got and make that better and automate and put a better experience for our users, get the service delivery higher. Again, same question to you: is that aligning with what you're seeing when clients come to you? Because one of the things that LACE does, right, is sort of look around technology, solutions and recommendations.
Absolutely, it's our bread and butter. Now, the thing about this slide is, for me, it's what it's saying to me is it's worrying that I think so few businesses are investing in new tech and solutions. And I think what we need to do is turn back the clock to when HRIS systems, really came to the fore. We have a number of really big players, which we all know about, playing in this field, in this marketplace, and they're great solutions. But HRIS solutions are there to do a specific set of tasks. They're there to hold employee data, key. Obviously, there's GDPR compliance involved. They are machines that churn through data and processes, and you get out the other end, some reporting, that kind of stuff. They were never designed as true employee experience platforms. And I think this is the misconception that we're hearing a lot about in the marketplace, where we have clients who spend enormous amounts of time, effort and resource and budget in implementing these large-scale solutions, these HRI solutions, and then 6, 12 months or 2 years down the line, what they're experiencing is a disengaged workforce with the HRIS platform, because they're not experienced platforms. So I think I'm really adamant that there's this misconception. Of course, HRIS providers are playing in the space of improving the products that they offer, but they are still designed to do something quite different to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and we use this line all the time. If you move your core HR from one place to the next, you're moving a system of record. You're not moving to a system of engagement. The core HR systems, the payroll systems, they're not systems of engagement. They're there to do quite tough administration tasks. And yes, they've got a better user interface for direct access, employee self-service, whatever you call it. And yes, they might have some modules around performance and learning and everything else, but they're not designed at their core to be what we call experience platforms. And a lot of clients have gone through that journey. it's interesting that probably I would say 50% of the customers that come, or potential customers that come to Applaud talking to us, are already at that pinnacle of having the best cloud tech, in quotes. They've done that journey, and they've still got the challenges because they've still got these disjointed processes. They've still got 15 systems that do different things. They've still got this variety of UX. They haven't got anything that joins them all up, that aligns the processes, that automates the processes across the different platforms. So it's not just about, are you on premise or are you on cloud? Have I got a lousy Oracle interface that people don't like? Will I solve that by going to Workday? Well, it's not a bad thing to think about, but it's not the answer to getting really top-class HR service delivery.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I spoke to one of our clients just 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually, who'd done exactly what we've just discussed, enormous amounts of investment, et cetera, and we're now coming to us to say, well, can you help us re-optimize the platform, because we're just not seeing the right levels of engagement in it and uptake. And it's of course, well, of course, any consultancy can help you do that. However, it's probably a good opportunity to just stop and think about is that the right solution for your people? Because
there's a lot of dollars that have gone into implementations. It was interesting to read about Amazon. I don't know if you know that they recently pulled their 3-year plan to upgrade. I won't use vendor names, it's unfair, but 3 years, and they've just gone back to their on-premise system because you can get the results out. So it happens to the best of us, and even Amazon, one we use all the time in our examples about consumer experience, and it's difficult sometimes to reflect that internally. This one was interesting to me as well. I keep using it's interesting. I must use a different word, but I was surprised by this one, even though this is the space kind of Applaud operates in, and we always evangelize efficiencies. Actually, this was quite high in terms of the stat. 90% of organizations think that their workers lose as opposed to spend basically half a day on HR tasks a week. That was higher than I anticipated. Maybe not for managers, particularly in some industries where there's a lot of administration and turnover. But for the general sort of employee population, that seemed to be quite high to me. Certainly, once you actually do the stats, which we'll look on the next slide, really gives you good opportunities to make cost savings. So again, what was your interpretation when you saw that? Was you surprised?
I mean, it's a shocking number to see on a page, I think, regardless of where your head's at with this. Am I surprised? Probably not. I mean, look, we have clients who have upward of 15, in some cases, different platforms around, people solutions. And the expectation is that their colleagues are having to interact with 15 different platforms to get their job done. So it's no wonder why 2 to 4 hours per week are lost to people, processes, and jobs. And I'm a big foodie. I love my food, and I've always been told never to go food shopping in a supermarket with an empty stomach. Because what happens is you end up spending more than you want to. Okay, you end up buying products that you wouldn't ordinarily purchase, and then a week later you're throwing them all away because you don't use them. And if we relate that bizarre analogy to the HR landscape at the moment, what we're seeing is large numbers of solutions being produced that solve individual problems, not the holistic issue, not the holistic solution or experience. And these are great platforms, these are great solutions, but what unfortunately it's doing is it's adding complexity to the employee experience rather than simplification. As we know, the key to a really, really excellent employee experience is simplicity. We don't want colleagues being diverted to multiple different platforms to get what they need to get done. The ideal experience is for colleagues to go to a single place where they can get everything done. And I think that single place, in terms of our consumer expectations, needs to be that social space. So if we think about Facebook or Instagram, whatever we use, as well as the tactical operational space. So your Amazons of the world, where you go to purchase an item and you expect a good service. You expect it to be quick, deliver on time, accuracy, feedback loop. All that, what we're seeing is a demand for that to be incorporated into a single platform.
some customers we talk to as well are adamant they don't want another thing or a place for people to go, and also looking at different channels or existing channels to get stuff done. So what I mean by that is, you know, let's say you've got your Teams set up, you maybe use Slack, you've got your intranet. You know, how can we have technology that can layer into our existing technology in a seamless way? So, for example, you know, can I use my Slack bot to start getting HR information out? Can I integrate somehow into Teams so that I can use the place where, you know, people go every day to get knowledge or information out? And I think platforms that can integrate that as well as sort of layer on top and give that sort of one-stop shop place to go, that's becoming a quite interesting space as well.
It is. It's that one-stop shop. I mean, it's perfectly articulated. But on top of that, because we're seeing so much around colleague voice being driven in the marketplace now from our clients. So if you think about it, colleagues have never before had such a strong voice than during the pandemic, and we don't want to lose that voice. We want to continue to articulate our thoughts and give feedback. So that platform that is the one-stop shop, which layers in feedback mechanisms, in-time feedback, is absolutely the way that, you know, the direction that we're heading in right now.
I'm conscious of time. I knew I'd go over 30 minutes, but we're almost at the end before we get to Q&A. This was the tail end of the Forrester report, which was where they interviewed a select band of customers to really get some dollar figures out. Was American. So again, some stats, a lot around productivity gains, which sourced by that previous slide, where, you know, if you can reduce the amount of time people are spending on something and let them free them up for other work, you can obviously get productivity gains out. Some really fascinating stats around retention, though. And I personally am always very cynical when I look at these things. You can really keep people with a good experience, but it's, you know, maybe not on its own, but certainly as a part of a whole of strategy. Retention was something that did come through, and I was really interested in. We had one customer that we had contributed to that, and I talked to them. And I said, tell me about this one, about retention. You know, is it genuinely true that you have lost people through having bad processes? And they said, yes, we've lost managers in the past who have quoted as their top reason for leaving, amongst a few others, that they got so frustrated with the administration and bureaucracy and the lack of visibility of their HR processes they had to do, that they decided they want to go somewhere else. So this seems to be a real thing. And, you know, if you can retain your top talent, which is where we all are at the moment, you mentioned the Great Resignation, there's massive returns to be had from that.
This is a great slide. I'm still asked now, what's the actual ROI of employee experience? Why should we focus and why should we invest in employee experience? We'll have a look at this slide, look at this page. I suspect now if we were to redo the report today, I'd possibly expect to see manager retention and employee retention more onus and more focus on that, because, you know, another absolute proof point of employee experience is the subject we referenced earlier on around the Great Resignation. And let's not beat around the bush. This is real. This is happening right now. It can't be ignored. It shouldn't be ignored. We speak to recruiters at LACE on a regular basis in various different organisations, and I was speaking to one of our clients just at the end of last week, actually, around how poor, as a recruiter, their processes are in their business. And she, you know, employee experience isn't just about the frontline colleagues. It's also about how good the journey is for colleagues within the organisation enacting the experience. So, you know, recruitment selection is a great example, because if we were to talk about persona types for just one moment, you'd have your candidate experience, you've got your recruiter and their experience, and you've also got the hiring manager. So it really does need to, you know, if we're thinking about tech, what is the solution? What is the ideal experience for all three of those persona types, not just the candidate? I think that's a really important factor, because it's of course we're talking about talent attraction, but if you haven't got the right processes in taking place to enable your internal systems and your internal journeys, your recruiters will, for example, in this case, will leave and join another organisation that does offer a better journey.
Yeah, and I think this comes on to maybe the last one, which is not just about the ROI, but can we elevate it to be even more than a cost-saving exercise and be actually a competitive advantage in the marketplace? Can a wider DX or digital strategy really give you competitive advantage over others that don't have a good strategy? And again, this is probably in your sweet spot here, Luke, I suppose. I'm sure you advise people on this all the time, but what are your thoughts?
So I was having a chat with a client. As you can probably tell, I speak to a lot of clients a lot of the time, and this particular individual said to me, "Well, what are my thoughts on consumer grade technology being a threat to HR?" And I thought it was a really interesting question. So I'll give you my thoughts. My thoughts are, if HR ignore the consumer grade experience externally of the workplace, it is a threat. But I actually see it as HR's biggest opportunity to embrace consumer grade technology for its employees. As we sort of touched on earlier on, we've all been forced to work in a different way and our expectations have changed. I almost don't see work and life experiences as separate when it comes to getting what you need to get done in your expectations. They should be thought of as people expectations, really, holistically. And organizations that don't or refuse to not sort of embrace the consumer grade wave that we're seeing in our personal lives will probably continue to lose talent. This also comes down to sort of, we also spoke about earlier on, the employee value proposition, and I think it's really key when organizations should right now be resetting their EVP to consider tech in that, and how does the tech play into the ideal experience that they want to offer.
I think what we're seeing aligns very much with what you said there. The customers we see kind of really most ahead are the ones that truly understand the power, of them offering their consumers a great experience. They understand.
Absolutely.
And find these are B2C companies. Obviously, if you make your services hard to buy online, or you go to a shop and it's a terrible experience, then your customers go get somewhere else. So they understand the power of brand, they understand the customer service, and you're making everything so frictionless if you're an online retailer. And those customers are the ones that are now reflecting that internally and saying, okay, we've got consumer experience sorted out, but actually to retain our talent, to nurture our talent, we've got to reflect that internally as well. And it's all around talent. People are our most expensive resources, aren't they? So anything that contributes to retaining your best people or having tools that push them up. Onboarding at the moment is a massive. So many people are looking at onboarding because now we're onboarding people that aren't coming to the office. How do you skill them up? How do you make them feel part of the team? How do you get the equipment day one? You imagine turning up to the job and you haven't got your laptop because IT haven't sorted it out and you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs a week. How does that make you feel in your first week? What is that journey for that person going to look like compared to someone that has come in and has had an absolutely fabulous onboarding experience, who's come in day one, knows their team, has great meetings, has all their equipment set up? What do you think is the longevity of their career path with those different scenarios? So these are sorts of things where it's all down to the people, really. How do you keep your people? How do you make them better?
It is, and it's this mindset shift of HR to sort of thinking more in the space of a business within a business. So we all know, and the cliched saying is that people are the organisation's best asset. Well, it's true, they are. So let's stop calling it a cliche. It's reality. So if HR starts to think about itself as a business, it should put its internal customers first, just as the business as a whole puts its external customers first. You want your customers to have the best experience possible. Why would you think any differently of your people? I think the equation is, Richard Branson coined it many years ago. Actually, a great employee experience based on a number of different elements. We've covered a lot of them in our discussion today. Leads to great customer outcomes. It's the most simplest equation possible, but it works.
That's the perfect place to go to Q&A. We're already 10 minutes over, but we'll do some questions justice, I think. But this is where I put you on the spot, Luca, because I'm the question master, and you're the question answerer. But I think we've had a couple in advance, so let's start there. To anyone else on the webinar, please shoot some questions across. It's always great to have live questions in and keep us on our toes. But we'll start with a couple that have come in already. And if you don't mind, Luke, I'll start with the one that we get asked all the time on these sorts of events, which is basically how do you get started? I think a lot of this stuff is kind of new to HR leaders. I think the idea of thinking about your employees first rather than HR's needs first is new. But often we see when we go to clients, we get very vague briefs like, our HR systems are clunky, our processes are clunky. It's okay to hear that, of course, but it's not as good as someone coming to you and say, look, we've got these pain points, how can you help us? So for someone that hasn't got a strategy, starting from scratch, where would you start? How would you go about it? And I think you've alluded to this a little bit about in terms of listening, but this is what you got to do, right? How would you go into a brand new client and say, this is what you got to do to get going? Absolutely.
And the starting point is listening. It's talking and it's listening to your people. So the days of solutionizing and big budgets for most markets or industries has probably gone. HR, HR and other central group functions have traditionally always solutionized in isolation and pushed out a product or a platform, done the standard change process. And it's, we could get away with it then. Organizations got away with it. Not anymore, because our expectations as people have changed. So I always advocate wide-scale listening exercises, and they don't need to be complex. They can be workshops, discussions, a survey, whatever. I always follow the 4D methodology when it comes to employee experience, which is discover, define, develop, and deploy. So discovery is you think you have an issue. You're getting wind of a problem. You think your processes are clunky. Okay, that's discovery. That's fine. Define is really uncovering the truth behind that, because you might think you have a problem, but do your employees agree? So the definition, and actually the 3Ds after are all employee engaged processes. So you should be, I always say we should be involving colleagues at every step of the way. So not just in discovering the problem, but it's in the solutionizing of the problem as well.
I think that's great advice. And as I said before, I think we touched on it earlier, not enough of our clients actually pull their workers, their consumers of the tech into the process of saying what's wrong for a start.
That's right.
Actually, all the way through the process, let's do some testing. Let's, this is the UAT part at the end. We always get into like, bring your employees in. What do they think?
And I'd even carry it on through, Ivan, to change and deployment at the end, because if you've got colleagues and employees involved in the solutionizing at the start, they've been involved in the entire journey. We see a shift actually in the change process, whereby colleagues actually become the change makers themselves. So again, it's all about empowerment and enablement and putting colleagues at the center of your activities, rather than it being a centrally pushed out driven activity, which, as we all know, centrally driven change tends to land less well than change that has been driven and has had colleague involvement from day one.
One of I must stop talking to the time, but I must say one anecdote was from my customer a few years ago. I won't name drop them, but basically what they did, they sat a cohort of workers and managers in front of a PC with a camera, and then just said, right, go and do whatever tasks that they were wanted to get feedback on, and film them, and then created a sizzle reel of 5 minutes of people getting very, very frustrated and cross. And even though you can't use that as a business case, it got across very, very powerfully actually where the challenges were. And it's not always where HR think they are.
That's absolutely right.
The right checkbox on a form or something. It could be something like, I go to my payslip and there's no way for me to get help when the page wrong. So some of this stuff's actually quite simple to solve if you get the right feedback.
It is, agreed.
Next one. I quite like this one. Can technology help HR become more agile? And goodness, we never need to be more agile than we are at the moment. So much change, day to day change. We're going through it all the time. It's not going to stop over the next 2 years as we have this great return to work, and we kind of get our heads around what hybrid working is, and then we get our heads around how do we make sure people are doing their work when they're at home and all this sort of stuff. And I read every day on things like HR Grapevine and Expert HR, all these things where HR are getting it wrong. Not through any fault themselves, maybe bad managers a lot of the time. So, there's a real need to iterate and innovate fast at the moment, and HR technology in particular can be a bit sludgy. So, I'm interested in, again, with your view on how can tech help HR become more agile as opposed to HR themselves.
I'd echo that, and of course there is a huge role for tech to play in the agility, the future agility of HR. But I would say this, if your people processes that sit behind the technology are broken and don't work, you can't put a plaster on that and expect everything to be fantastic. So regardless of what your tech solution is going to look like and going to be, which again, as we said earlier on, should not be a decision made in isolation, HR does need to invest some time and effort in sorting out its people processes and policies that sit behind the scenes. I really do believe that. I have seen cases where that hasn't been done, and as good as the tech may have been, it hasn't worked as well as it could have done. So ultimately, of course, it does, but I still do think there's some time and investment in HR involving, focusing on people processes first.
Yeah, for sure, you've got to get your processes right. There's no point modelling a bad process, is there? I think one of the trends in the sort of the tech industry is really moving towards citizen developers, which is kind of a dream, and the reality is, you're never going to get an HR business partner developing, a new application, but moving away as much as you can away from that IT stack, the cliche where as an HR leader, you want something done and you want it done next month, but you go to IT and they say, well, we've got a 6-month waiting list. Technology, that's where tech is going at the moment, and moving away from you have to go and get your JavaScript developer in the IT team sitting over in Singapore or whatever, and he's going to be available next February. So get your change request in now. By the time that time comes, something else has come up. So the technology industry, and we're in the low-code, no-code platforms, the thing that allows you not to give it to HR business partners. They should be able to do content, but actually developing processes and forms and stuff like that, moving that out into sort of like an HRIS function. That's definitely a trend we'll probably see in the next 5 years or so. I'm going to ask one last question because I'm going to get told off by my team, but this one came in yesterday. So long one, let me read it out directly off the screen. One of the key issues I see with any client and the implementation of technology is governance and ensuring that people take ownership of their roles and responsibilities. Too often when technology is implemented, workarounds are created to adapt the process to a particular senior manager's or country-specific need. I definitely agree with that. This in turn results in a process that's difficult to manage and providing different user experiences. Have the speakers experienced this? Do they have any recommendations to avoid this from happening? And we'll make that the last question, Luca. So
I would actually just build on the first questions, my response on the first questions to tackle some of this. I've seen this happen, actually. I've seen it happens in most organizations, to be honest. You have specific leaders or countries that want to do things their own way, and they'll try and bypass the system. They'll try and do whatever they want to do to get that done. If you're involving colleagues throughout the entire process and the change process, and you have documented insights and feedback, it's a much more compelling argument when you take it to that particular leader, whether it's a country leader or a functional leader, to say, you really shouldn't be doing it this way because our colleagues are asking it to be done in this way. I come back to the colleague voice. It's something that just can't be contested. It's the most powerful tool that any HR team can lay its hands on, which is why I'll always advocate employee voice as the foundation of a really good employee experience. And I see that supporting the change process enormously.
That's a good answer. And I'm going to give you the last word, Luca. Well, that's a nice way to end the session. So I'm just checking no questions, any more questions come in. So we're just going to wrap up. As Luca mentioned, the Forrester report is a free download. I'm not sure you can get it from the LACE website. I think you probably can, but there's the link for Applaud. And if you have any sort of follow-up or anything you want to chat to us about, also really like to chat, there's our email addresses. You're welcome to get in contact. The recording for this will be available if you've got colleagues that were not able to attend. Lots of people like to download the recordings, watch in their own time. That will be circulated, and I think the slides will be circulated too at some point. So, Luca, thank you very much for joining me. Your voice held up very well, nice and strong. You can go and have a lemsip now.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone on the call for attending. It was a nice session. I hope you enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of your day. That's the end of today. Thanks.